What can a Century 21 agent do for you? They explain the market, love a good barbie and never drink milk from the carton. They do your homework, your legwork and sometimes yard work. So invite one over. Century 21 agents. Smarter, bolder, faster.
Hello and welcome to Your Property Empire. I'm Chris Gray. On tonight's show, how has the ups and downs of the share market affected the property market? Can you still buy an affordable investment in an inner-city blue-chip suburb? And what should you do if your tenant set up a drug lab and don't pay the rent? Well, joining me tonight to give his opinions on our stories is Charles Tarbey, Chairman and owner of Century 21 Australasia, and we've got Tom Panos, Head of Real Estate Advertising at News Corp. Good to see you guys.
Thanks.
Now, there's been quite a lot of stock market volatility of late. So do we think that the volatility encourages people to invest in the property instead? Charles?
Oh, look, it's always been that way. People always try to match the two, but they're so completely different animals. You know, one you can go into and do so well overnight. And same with real estate. You could sit there for 6 months and if you look at the commercial market in Sydney as an example, there's a property I had valued for $3.4 million 6 months ago that sold for $4.1 million in January. So 6 months. It's all about a timing thing, isn't it? But no, I think the stock market volatility is not going to have a great deal of impact on the real estate market.
Now, Tom, you obviously see buyers all the time with your auction business, as well as talking to the agents. Do you see changes in moods with the stock market over the years?
It balances out. Some markets don't care at all about what's happening in the stock market. I have seen, Charles, in previous years, markets like Mossman, where a lot of the people that live there are connected to equity markets, whether they get bonuses because they're employed in financial services, or they actually have got line of credits attached to the share market. They get very conservative on buying. But I think, generally speaking, a stock market that's bad just reinforces how good bricks and mortar are. But on Charles's point, it's hard to put a correlation and say that went up, this went down.
Yeah, but I actually heard through a car guy that they actually think some car prices actually increase in value of historic cars, that they reckon people come out of the share market and even get into cars, which to me is a really weird thing. I can understand property, but cars, different kind of thing.
Yeah, they'd have to be great cars. I mean, the car I had 40 years ago when I was a kid would do pretty well today, but it was...
funny you didn't sell it.
A Canary yellow Charger, Tom, you know, one of those things. Yeah. So they'd be worth a fortune today, but it was a bit shattering when I had it then. Look, I think actually, Chris, Tom made a really good point, and there the margin calls kicked in going back a few years ago. Yeah. There was a lot of people in the equity market that absolutely got decimated. Yeah. You know, I know one guy that had literally had $7 million of net assets. And then within the space of 6 months, he was margin called to the extent where he had gone backwards by 200,000. He had to actually get out at a certain point or he was gone. And a lot of people in equity markets do have those expensive homes. And if things change and turn, and some of them are margin called again, which can happen, it can decimate some of those areas. They're the ones that really get impacted the most when equity markets go a bit haywire. Yeah.
And so that's why you've got to be careful where obviously you invest or where you buy your home. Now, some areas of Australia have gone down. Does that mean that some people are talking that interest rates may go up because of that?
I hope not. I think in some of the areas going down, they're going down because they should be going down. We had an interest rate hike going back last year that we weren't expecting, and that sort of kicked the market on a bit further than it should have gone. The market was just starting to level out and correct, and all of a sudden everybody got excited again. So the economy might need an interest rate reduction, but the real estate market does not. And if it gets one, it could cause all sorts of differentials across the country in terms of pricing.
Again, Tom, your auction market is a very, very strong market and reasonably solid, I would have thought. But again, you're speaking to the other agents. You must see some agents saying, look, there's so much stock and there's no buyers there.
Well, that's what they were definitely saying in November and December. and obviously a lot of people press the pause button over the holiday period. I've had agents that have told me they couldn't sell some houses in December because there was so much stock on the market, and they've come back, and because a lot of agents are still holidaying and there was not that many listings on the market in those first 2 weeks of January, they've been able to sell these homes. I think a better test is going to be past the Australia Day, Wednesday actually, when you've got everyone saying all the holidays are gone, it's business as usual. That's what we're going to see, a normal real estate market again.
Yeah, that was the big thing to wait for. Now, I was in Double Bay today, and I saw an agent at the light, so I jumped over and had a quick chat while he was waiting for the green light. He was saying, have we seen many people change, especially the foreign buyers, because obviously the Australian dollar's come off, all the expats from Hong Kong, Singapore and China. Have you seen anything?
I think, well, a lot of the foreign buyers have got their own issues right now. And so I think many of them are probably holding their cards closer to the chest than they would have done because, again, a lot to do with the equity markets. But my biggest concern, because we go back a year ago and everybody was complaining about foreign buyers, Asian buyers, the whole thing, and you and I both agree it's the best thing we could possibly have, having overseas investment. Because when we need it most, and guess what? With a lot of the stock that's coming on the market and coming on out of the ground over the next couple of years, we will need those foreign investors. And if they go quiet on us, a lot of construction industry jobs are going to go. So I don't think it's made a big change yet. I don't think they're rushing us, but I still think they're very keen on property in Australia and New Zealand.
It's like everyone hates the banks, but then the GFC, they're happy that we've got them and we've got decent banks. So they hate the foreigners, but then when we need them... Because what would the Gold Coast be without the foreign investors, Tom?
It'd be very concerning, particularly, as Charles says, when you're seeing properties that are being completed roughly at the same time, you're just seeing a glut of real estate. Now, you take away a big section of the buyers, overseas buyers, we're talking about rents going down, we're talking about sale prices going down. They help the demand-supply equation very much.
Now, how are you finding stock levels at the moment?
Yeah, they've been climbing quite strongly. I've got the percentages for Australia and New Zealand, and when I look across the nation, they have increased quite significantly over this time last week. One of the areas where there's a lot of stock coming on is in areas like Perth as well, because the market there almost overnight suffered significant price falls due to the mining industry and so on. And there are some of the banks, even the local banks, that have been selecting suburbs that they actually are taking a very close look at before they even finance in certain suburbs of Perth. So I think that a lot of stock came on the market because people thought, you know, maybe it's time to get out. And so that has caused a bit of a glut in some areas.
Yeah. Tom, how are you finding the buyer side? And I assume you probably haven't done any auctions so far this year. No. But how are you finding it towards the end of the year and the agents going to feel at the moment? Yeah,
so at the end of the year, it had definitely shifted towards buyers saying, OK, we're not going to go crazy over this because we now know that prices have stopped going up. So that gave them the law of scarcity, of missing out, all of a sudden disappeared. And I actually noticed prices come down in December. Houses that I thought, oh, we'll get 950, we're getting 900. I also noticed a lot of real estate agents were rocking up and they would be on their mobile phones anxiously calling 2 minutes before the auction saying, oh, where's John Smith that said he'd be here, or the Chans aren't here. They'd be ringing around, and I had to remind many of them that I think the Chans weren't going to get there.
Yes, yeah.
And maybe they should have looked after them a few months ago when they were going to be there.
It's a very interesting discussion point around real estate industry and real estate agents today. It's a very interesting
How
time.
do you pick your agent these days? Because are you picking a different agent today than you might have 6 or 9 months ago?
Oh, look, the market in Australia or Australasia has changed, no question. And we also talked about this last year, that anybody that got into the industry in the last 2, 3, 4 years has probably never really been in real estate. And a lot of those people, this is a time where people leave the industry, because gone are the days where if you got a property for sale, which was the hardest part, you didn't really have to do anything else. Just put up the banners and Tom would turn up, and use his auctioneering skills and get everybody a little excited, and off it would go. The agent would do very, very little. That's changed.
So it's more order taking.
Oh, look, we need to talk about this in depth, because the industry is really, really going to let go of a lot of people.
Now, is it technically a good time for the newspapers as well? Because I guess the classic thing is in a booming market, just any old agent, chuck it on the internet and you're going to get a sale. Do people now need to go for that extra? Because in your seminars you talk about real estate advertising. You just want to get that extra person in the auction, don't you?
Yeah, I think when the market gets hard, the market no longer makes the sale, and all of a sudden the real estate agent's got to make a sale. So what do you need? You need an agent that can actually sell, not just an agent that rocks up, puts keys in the door. In terms of marketing, you also need to actually let the world know that this property is for sale, because all of a sudden people aren't lining up 20 deep saying we want to have a look at this. So that all of a sudden the dynamics change, and you've got to outmarket other homes that are on the market, and whether that's print, online, some people are using social media now, whether you letterbox drop all the area to let people know that you've got a home there. All it means is that agents all of a sudden are going back to 101 sales and marketing, and that is sell real estate, don't take orders.
Social media marketing, you see a whole lot of that in the last couple of years, and that's how agents were marketing themselves. But it's not about marketing only now, it's about learning how to negotiate a transaction. And a lot of people have never been in that position in the last few years. So it's going to be interesting to watch the skill set of agents over.
I think that we're going to see less agents working in real estate over the next few months, and that'll continue because they simply can't live off those incomes and salaries that decrease.
And we had those conversations 3 years ago, so we can just go back to the shows that we did 3 years ago and ask the same questions again.
Absolutely.
But maybe we shouldn't tell the viewers that. Let's have a look at, we're talking about the papers, let's have a look at what's coming up already. You've got a couple of properties for us.
Yeah, so the first one, 34 Robe Street, St Kilda, and Graham Wilson from Wilson Wilson Agents, I just spoke to him. This got a price guide of $3 million plus. It's a mix of old and new. Prime location, St Kilda. Most of the viewers here that follow real estate would know that St Kilda has got an absolute buzz and has always got high demand. A land of 580 square metres, nice central hallway that gives the house a lot of depth, and beautifully renovated. It's got a timeless renovation, but the most important thing that when you're buying in St Kilda, you're buying in a good suburb, and this is an amazing location. So check that out, 34 Robe Street in St Kilda.
You talk about agent skill set. Graham Wilson is a long-established real estate practitioner, and if there's anybody who knows how to negotiate a transaction, it would be him.
Oh wow, I've just got off the phone to him, Charles. He'd be rapt to hear that, and so the vendors would feel in good hands.
Oh, very good hands.
Now, just seeing those beautiful pictures on there, that reminds me on Facebook, your mate Hilton Gold, the main viewer around town, he put an advert on, or he showed us this video on Facebook that was an amateur agent from wherever he was, literally taking his phone around doing his own video production.
Oh, really?
And it was absolutely hilarious because it was so bad. And it just reminds you that, look, there's a big difference between an agent taking his mobile phone around and getting some professional pictures.
Yeah.
Well, the big question is we still haven't been able to identify who Hilton Gold is.
We know he's one of three people. It could be one of them is present here at the table now.
We better run to property 2, Tom.
Number 2, 15 Wakefield Road in Glenhaven. Go and have a look at this property. Now, the agent, Micheline, she's a great agent. I've known her for quite a while, and she set up a great independent business in that part of the world. It's got a price guide of 6.5 to 7,150,000. A nice, sophisticated lifestyle property. It's only a few kilometres from Northwest Railway Station. 5 acres, arguably the closest acreage to the M2, which is always a big plus. It's got a lot of wow factor. It's got a tennis court, edge pool, spa facilities, and go in and have a look at that. It is we picked this property because I don't think that this week on the market is anything that is as special as this. So go and have a look at that. 15 Wakefield Road, Glenhaven.
Yeah, looks absolutely fantastic. And as we said before, Tom, we need some of these agents to invite us there for the weekend, the 3 of us, so we can give it a proper appraisal.
Yeah, have a good look. Have a good look.
Sounds good. Well, some wonderful properties hitting the papers and the internet. As Tom says, then now we've come to Australia Day. This is when the market really starts taking off. So get online and get onto the papers. Anyway, join us after the break when it's time for Purchase or Pass.
What can a Century 21 agent do for you? They open your home, solve your problems and pat your dog. They provide the service of a butler and the savvy of a business tycoon. Century 21 agents. Smarter, bolder, faster.
Welcome back to Your Property Empire. And now it's time for Purchase or Pass. In our Purchase or Pass segment this week, we see if it was still possible to get a great investment close to the city for a reasonable budget at the end of last year. So we found a one-bedroom, one-bath unit with parking 8.5 kilometres from the CBD and less than a kilometre to the local action. It's 68 square metres on the first floor with a courtyard off the lounge for outside dining and entertaining. It's located at the back of the building in a well-maintained block of 22. The block sold for $650,000 and has a rental estimate of $550 to $600 and has got a strata fees of $633 a quarter. So I think it was actually $625 it sold for rather than $650. Anyway, I thought we'd look at some of the information on the advert and decipher kind of how we read into that. So when you hear something that's maybe 8.5 kilometres from the CBD and less than a kilometre to the heart of the suburb, what does that mean to you, Charles?
Well, anything,
probably too close to the city for a man that lives in the Blue Mountains.
For me, as we've always said, the western suburb starts at Centennial Park for most people. So that means it's nice and located close to the city. And if you've brought it up or you've raised it as a property, purchase or pass, it's likely to be in the eastern suburbs somewhere. And you've likely bought it off one of your mates that works in the eastern suburbs. So that's what I got out of that, Chris. What did you get out of that, Tom?
OK. What about for you, Tom, 68 square metres?
Oh, it says to me that it's not tiny. It's a sort of unit that's livable. So they're happy to talk about the size there. And on that previous point, 8.5 k's to the city. Anything within 10 k's of the city, you think, oh, it'll suit a city dweller. So it feels like you might not be right in the heart of it, but you're close to it. That's the initial impression.
Yep. Charles, courtyard off the lounge. For someone that lives in the Blue Mountains, you like fresh air. How does the courtyard suit?
Well, I had a look at the photo. It looked pretty nice, but it looked like I was looking at a wall. But was that right? Are you looking at a bit of a wall?
Potentially, yeah.
So we'd call that privacy, right? So you get no neighbours looking at you. So that's what I'd get from that. Tell me, 68 square metres, does that include the patio?
That's included in the patio, yeah.
And not the car space, just that?
Yeah, I think car space is maybe 15 on top or something.
Oh.
So again, it's not massive.
No, it's a great size.
For the inner city.
For that price.
Back of block, Tom.
Back of block, to me, straight away, the initial feeling is that it's quiet. That you're not going to be hearing lots and lots of noise. That's the suggestion on why the agent would write that in their marketing literature.
But maybe the block's the other way round and the back's the freeway. You never know. So you've obviously got to go and check it out at the same time. But in this case, that's right. North-facing, Charles. Oh,
well, that's an important part of it. You know, the sun, not making sure it's not facing to the west, where you just got to have your air conditioner on from a certain time. Facing north always is an appealing thing, and every agent will use it when they can.
22 in block, Tom.
22, it's basically saying it's not one of these big Meriton complexes where you won't know everyone. 22, you'll get to know who the people are there. It's also not as good as, say, 6, 8, 10 or 12, but they were, 22 says that it's not a monster of a building.
Yeah, reasonable size. $633 a quarter for the strata fees, Charles.
Yeah, I thought that was really excellent. Actually, and I would have promoted that as probably one of the first points, because some of those buildings down there can cost you a great deal more, and a lot of people are very concerned about strata fees, and they should be.
Yeah, and I'll do the final one, $500 to $600 a week for the rent, 4.5% to 5% rent. Oh, this market is pretty superb. So purchase or pass for you guys?
Definitely pass. Purchase based on the price. And
what about you, Tom?
Purchase. Whether it was $625, $650, I'm not quite sure what it was, but it was good buying.
Look, I think this is an almost textbook purchase for someone that has a limited budget but still wants to be in a blue chip suburb. Everything ticks the boxes, so for me, I'd purchase as well. Anyway, over the holidays, we had an email in from Sandy, and she asked, We've had 2 tenants in 2 years. The first left the place in a mess and was subletting, so we sacked the property manager and hired a new one. Then the second tenant started a drug lab and left 9 months into a 1-year lease and were let off with only having to drop the keys off at the property manager's office because she said that she wouldn't be able to pay any further rent and she can't get blood out of a stone. So now we're unsure of whether the landlord insurance will pay for the rent arrears of rent owing of the remainder of the lease. So, Charles, will your landlord's insurance cover you for a drug lab, do you think?
It can. It can. It depends on the landlord insurance you get, because some companies will offer it to you. It might be called malicious damage, I'm not quite sure. But there are certainly, I know that EBM, which is an organisation we've used for a long time, do have a policy that will cover loss of rent, and I'm sure that they cover circumstances that are different than most.
Yeah. Now, Tom, should something like these stories that we see on the news all the time, should that put off investors, or do you think these are kind of one-offs and maybe depends on the area you live in?
Very one-offs. I mean, I heard one last year, one the year before. Maybe there's more of them. I mean, I feel sorry for this landlord. I mean, not only do they get a drug lab there, obviously the drug lab's not doing that good. They can't even pay the rent. So, I mean, I really feel sorry for these people.
You said that, Tom.
Yeah. Well, I used to be in mobile phones in my 20s, and the drug dealers used to pay their phone bills, so they were the best ones because they never wanted to get cut off.
I think you've got to watch those properties, and property managers should be aware of it. Where there's excess water being used in certain properties and so on, you can pick up these various things. So.
Yeah, should be good. Well, let's jump to your slides very quickly. Auction clearance rates.
We don't have those this week, so they're a bit thin this week. So we thought we would just go straight into the listing numbers.
Homes advertised for sales.
Okay.
Yeah.
The homes advertised for sale jumped really significantly over this time last week, which is an expectation. I mean, you're going to see that because it's been quiet over that period of time, and they're just going to jump real quick. 10.39% increase across Australia over this time last week. So that's massive when you consider what's happening out there. New Zealand market had such a massive increase in the last week, I don't even want to quote the number because it seems so ridiculously high. So they're in for also a flood of property which will really settle the market down, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I really don't think that's a bad thing, because a lot of people shouldn't be on the market, Tom, as you know.
Yeah.
Some people come on thinking that this is a time, and they just really need, if the motivation's not strong, they really need to move off the market and sit on the bench for a while.
Now, just for the non-regular viewers that may not watch every week, even though they should do, the reasoning that you bring up the New Zealand market is you think that gives us a good indication of what's going to happen over here.
Yeah, their cycle has been ahead of our cycle to some degree, and their market actually started booming at a very different time than our marketplace. It was really quite odd to watch what was happening, and it was almost as though there was a significant amount of interest just in New Zealand alone from overseas buyers, and then all of a sudden it switched over to Australia. And I think it's back in parts of New Zealand. I think New Zealand is still a very, very strong marketplace to be in.
Great. Well, let's take a look at the rents.
Yeah, a lot of people said that the rents were dropping all over Sydney. Well, that's not really the case. They might be in some areas, but if you take the top end and the rents drop a little bit, it can have a strong reflection across the rest of the market. There was only a decline of 0.42% over this time last week, and it hasn't been that bad when you consider some people were saying that it was up to 10%. There are marketplaces that are struggling. You know, Northern Territory market's struggling with rent drops, high rent drops, but we had Queensland perform. It was actually increased by 0.22%, but our best performer was actually Adelaide at 0.55% increase. So overall, when you take them all into consideration, we had a negative 0.24% increase over this time last week.
Okay, and very quickly, the vacancy rates.
2.46 in Sydney, which is really good. In Melbourne, 3.53. Perth, 7.57. So an average of 4.52. Perth market is one we're really watching very closely.
Sounds good. Charles Tarbey from Century 21, Tom Panos from News Corp as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We've got the whole team back together, and next week it will be after Australia Day, so the market should be not in full move, but at least getting there. So we'll see you next week. Until then, I'm Chris Gray. Good night.
The information featured in this program is general in nature and therefore should not be relied upon. Guests appearing on the program may have commercial arrangements with some of the companies mentioned. Before making any investment, insurance or financial planning decisions, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you.